Hey, Strategy Simplified. I want to invite you to join the Networking Challenge taking place March 3rd to 7th. It's a free challenge where each day we're going to send you an email with the strategy and the specific tactics that you can execute to get your foot in the door at the world's most prestigious consulting firms. Think McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Deloitte, and so much more. Register now for free at the link in this episode's show notes. Networking is a massive part of the recruiting process for strong candidates who get offers, and we hope you'll join us. Again, link is in the show notes to register for the March 3rd to 7th Networking Challenge. You're listening to the Strategy Simplified podcast. Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is a great one. It's a BCG healthcare case interview example, and it's led by ex-BCGer Ish, who is also a management consultant case coach. You can work with Ish one-on-one for your interview prep coaching via the link in this episode's show notes. So go there to learn how to book sessions, how to purchase coaching hours. You can book 1 hour or 8 hours or 20 hours. Again, show notes for all of that. So this case is great because it doesn't matter if you're targeting a healthcare consulting role. All top consulting firms expect you to be familiar with healthcare. They expect you to be familiar with all global industries of consequence, and healthcare is certainly one of those key industries. If you'd like to get up to speed on other key industries that firms expect you to know for case interviews, check out our business breakdowns segment. We've got them releasing on the first and third Wednesday of each month. For example, we did an episode on Nike, on Adobe, on Southwest Airlines, and a whole lot more. So check those out, go back to the podcast and listen to those. Okay, let's get your pencil and paper out. Get ready to work through the case alongside Ish and our special guest. Let's get into the show.
Awesome. So everybody give Akash some words of bravery and words of confidence so that he can pass this case with flying colors. So Akash, this is going to be a case that is a bit different from the industry that you're used to. But if there's any questions during the case about any of terminology that you don't understand, happy to clarify that. So here's a case prompt for you. So our client is Novartis. They are one of the largest pharma companies in the world. You've probably heard of them. And they are headquartered out of Switzerland. They have a small business unit that runs research and development, and they produce therapeutics. In this particular case, this business unit is focused on a rare disease. It's called retinoblastoma. It's a rare eye cancer, and it takes place in the back of your eye, so in a part of the eye called the retina. And it affects a small amount of people across the globe. But for this particular case, we're focused on Europe.
Okay.
So in the past few years, Novartis hasn't really paid attention to this business unit. Management has given little interest in growing this business unit. However, recently there was a new CEO appointment, and he has hired you to identify ways to grow this particular business unit.
Okay, so this seems interesting for a couple of reasons that I read and use that eye cancer on a goods probably would be interesting to see how we can support. So before proceeding further to revalidate that we're on the same page, our client is Novartis, and we have been hired by the CEO to support how we can grow this R&D business unit focused on retina cancer, with
That's
our
right.
focus geography being Europe.
Yes.
Thank you for this. A few clarifying questions that I would like to ask before proceeding further. Did it have any objectives, themes, aspirations, or timelines, mainly from terms of profitability or product launch, anything of that sort?
Yeah, can you be maybe a bit more specific as to like what kind of objectives you're looking for?
Since we are to grow this business unit, I would probably think more from a profitability standpoint and any timelines that we need to adhere to.
Yeah, fantastic. So we don't have a profitability target, but we have a revenue target. The
Okay.
CEO wants the revenue of this business unit to 3x in the next 4 years.
Okay, that's pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
Uh,
And currently their revenue is about $200 million annually.
okay, so it's a launched product. It's not something which is a bit more as of years. Second up, I would want to understand something on how the business makes money. Who do we sell these drugs to? Is it as a conventional value chain where you sell it off to their distributors, they sell it off to maybe clinics and so on? Or it's a direct B2C business?
Yeah, so the whole value chain in pharma that you see does apply, but for simplicity, let's consider that our end customer, which is the patient suffering from retinoblastoma, is our target.
Okay, that of the patient. With this being said, the final thing that I would probably want to understand will be, are we the only player in this market or there's a few other players as well?
Yeah, good question. So there is growing interest in researching retinoblastoma, and it's increasingly been a competitive market, particularly driven by entry of small biotechs who are innovative and exploring a lot of different therapeutics in this space.
Okay, so it's a bit more from business. So thank you for this. Can I have a moment to structure my thoughts and then I can walk you through it?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay.
Heads up, future consultants. If you're serious about breaking into consulting, but you know that you'll need all the help you can get, join our Super Prep program to change your chances. Check out the link in this episode's show notes to confirm your seat for the next Super Prep cohort. In Super Prep, we'll help you add business and consulting experience to your resume to fill in gaps through a 1-week virtual consulting project known as Strategy Sprint. These projects run once a quarter. Next, we'll help you integrate your new consulting experience into your resume and cover letter through custom edits by our MBB team. We'll help weave a compelling narrative through your resume and cover letter to display how your unique background and skill set makes you an ideal candidate for your target firms. From there, an MBB coach will build a custom prep plan for you and guide you through case and fit interview prep. Recruiters love candidates who bring both consulting experience and polish to the table, and Super Prep will allow you to do both, plus the confidence to shine in your interviews. We run Super Prep cohorts once a quarter, so check out the link in the show notes to confirm your seat today. In addition, you can book a call with a member of our team before you join. Look forward to seeing you in Super Prep.
Okay, so thank you for your time. So to grow the revenues, I would specifically like to evaluate this from two angles, from a development standpoint and other from a diversification standpoint. From a development standpoint, I could look into developing a product, and the second could be somewhere on the market. By the product development, I mean more around customizations, which could be from a pricing standpoint to be a bit more competitive, or from features or some related diseases that probably we can incorporate to cure. From a market standpoint, we can look into developing it further as through organic channels as marketing, better account management, and better supply chains. And a few inorganic channels here could be as having better partnership, as in with eye clinics, hospitals, and so on. With diversification, I would normally like to look into how we can diversify our approach within markets, since Europe is a very big continent. This could be done by understanding what are some most affected areas. Second up, identifying are there any potential players or subsidies or other schemes that we can partner with, and with that enter into such offerings. So with this being said, I would first up want to understand what are the customers' willingness to pay and features that they reply, what is our pricing, to see if there's any barrier that we see from this angle. And the next step would probably be to understand what we're marketed or markets do they exist in, and are there further potentials to attention.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So let's just assume for this case that patients are willing to pay. It's a rare disease. There's a number of treatments out there, but they're willing to pay for this particular product or set of products. Your other question was about market. Can you be a bit more specific as to what you'd like to look under the market?
Yeah. There will be two major factors that I would like to look into. First up, the countries where we currently operate. Second up, our current penetration rate. This would probably give me an understanding of what is the background that we come from and if we can possibly look for penetrating further into these or would like to explore some new countries.
Yeah, that's also a good question. Let's say that we are all over Europe right now. We have very good penetration. We're one of the market leaders. So we don't see any opportunities from that front either.
Okay. So it's the do not see anything from that front leader. I could probably think about having more, maybe something from, okay. So maybe he can tweak something from a pricing standpoint, since we already know most of the patients would buy since it's a rare drug. And second up, more or less, the quantity cannot be increased going further. So the only factor that probably remains here is something on on price for drug. So we can assume or go further into what is the package mix, how do we sell the drug for now? Is it in a pack of 3, 5, and so on? And further, how we can tweak the pricing here.
Yeah, these are all good understanding. Let me direct you a little bit. Let me nudge you in a different direction. So we're not focused on any current products that are in the market. What we're going to focus on is more on the research and develop pipeline. So what is being developed, what is currently in clinical trials, what is being studied. That is the aspect of the value chain that we're focused on.
Okay. So if that is what we are focusing on, then probably to increase revenue, it could be on how we can enhance our chances of the drugs and pipeline to succeed, the clinical trials, and going further all the stages.
Yeah.
So a few things that I would like to understand here is how's the pipeline laid out, how many phases of testing do we have, and our current chances of success.
Okay.
And going further, what could be done.
Fantastic. So we have some of that data. Can you think of other things that you need to look at in addition to the factors that you mentioned to get to our client's goal?
I could look at it from supply and a demand perspective. All the factors that I did say initially come from a supply perspective, as in, are we able to have a successful shot in the market? So from a demand perspective, it could be to understand, is there a demand for this? Are people willing to buy this? And is that market big enough so that you could achieve a 3x revenue for?
Yeah. So let's forget about supply. We already established that folks, I apologize, I meant demand. We already established that people are willing to buy this drug. So let's forget about demand. Let's focus on supply solely. So within the supply side, you mentioned approval rate or probability of success. That's a good metric. You mentioned a number of drugs that are in the pipeline. That's also a good metric. Can you think of other quantitative metrics that could help you get to the client goal?
I am sorry, I'm not able to think a lot anymore.
Yeah, no problem.
Could you nudge me a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So one of these terms it's called time to commercialization. So let's say that if something is in development for in early phases, so maybe they are 10 years out into the market. Maybe something if late phase, it's maybe only 1 or 2 years time to market. So that's another factor that we can consider. And then the other factor is what is the maximum revenue that you can get from commercialization of this. So in the pharma industry, there's something called peak sales, which is if the product sells well, there is a ramp up time to that. But peak sales is oftentimes what's used as the estimate for revenue.
Okay.
So let's look at these factors. These are all very good. I'm going to share an exhibit with you And I would love your thoughts on what we can do here.
Nadia. Uh, thank you for the exhibit. Can I have a moment you could digest for all the information here?
Sure.
Okay, so thank you for this. From this exhibit, we more or less get the major insights into what the drug pipeline looks like and what could be revenue scale up by years. By time to commercialization in the first, the drug funnel, are these in months? I think it's
These
in
are in
months.
years.
Okay, these are in years.
Yeah.
Okay. So from this, we could probably see that the timelines be a lot longer. Second up, we can from here estimate what could be maximum revenues within each phase where the drug is. And with the second table on revenue scale-up, we can probably understand how much we expect the maximum revenues to be at end of year 4 and go moving on. So do you want me to calculate what we can perhaps think the revenue to be and see if it makes up the 3 times benchmark that we would like to achieve?
Sure. And what would be your approach to that?
Okay. So I would like to do this in... Okay, so my approach here will be to go in 3 major steps. The first step would be to understand how much of approval rates multiplied by maximum revenue to see how many drugs do pass this. Second up, since I know years of... Oh wait, can I have a moment to connect these two together?
Sure. Yeah. Take your time.
A question here. We see that years of drug commercialization. I understand this to be only after phase 3. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is after
Okay.
phase 3 has been completed.
Okay.
When it's in the market, what is the time to scale up to reach maximum revenue?
Okay. And what do we mean by maximum revenue per phase?
Yeah. So
Uh,
maximum revenue is, yes, within that phase itself.
Okay, so we would also be able to sell our drugs even though it's within research phases.
Yes, if it does pass that kind of the approval rate, then you would be able to.
Okay. So revenue scale up. Okay. So we know what could be maximum revenue at phase 3. So during the research phase, we probably do not need to go into depth because major ramp up would occur after it's passed all the phases.
Yes.
So my understanding will be to see maximum revenues that we could earn is 60% of 100 million after phase 3. Now, how does it ramps up? So in year 1, it would be 25% of the maximum and going further 50%, 7,500. So
Okay.
that would be my more or less overall approach to doing it. Does that
Okay.
seem fine enough?
Yeah, let's start with, it's a good point. Let's focus on phase 2 and 3, because
Okay.
if you look at research in phase 1, those do not fall within the 4-year target. They're at 7 and 5 years, so let's ignore them. Let's focus
Okay.
on the potential revenue from phase 2 and 3.
Hey, Strategy Simplified. My name is Katie. I am a Black Belt alum, and I spent 3 years at BCG in the Middle East. I am now here as part of Management Consultants team to help you figure out what products we offer will help you on your consulting journey. And I also advise Black Belt members and Super Prep members once they become a part of our community so that they get the most out of what we offer. If you would like to book a 15-minute call with me, you can click the link in the show notes, and I look forward to meeting you.
Okay, so let's start with phase three. Here, the time to commercialization is 2 years. The maximum revenue that we could possibly see from here is $100 million. In year one, we see the revenue scale up to max is 25% of 100 million, which would be 25 million. And in year two, we get 50% of it, 50 million. So total revenue increase that we would see from phase two could be of 75 million. Since that, yeah. And similarly for phase three, since it's a 1-year program, years of drug commercialization is 1, which would be, you would get 25% of 100, which is 25 million as math. So total revenue and we have peak exceed from here would be 75 for phase 2 drug and 25 for phase 3 drug. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that what you just calculated, what's the unit of that?
That is in millions of dollars.
Yes, but there is another unit to it.
Revenue scale up the maths. I am not sure what
that is per drug that is approved, right?
Okay, yes, that's per drug for approved. Yeah.
Exactly. So now what do you have to further account this for?
How many drugs would be approved within that phase?
Correct. Yes.
So in phase 2, okay, now I get what the exhibit actually means. Okay. So in phase 2, we have 5 drugs, approval rate of 40%, which means that 2 drugs would be successful in phase 2. So actual revenues would be 2 cross 75, or this I think that $1 million. Now in phase 3, we have 2 drugs in 5 lines with an approval rate of 60%, which more or less means 1 drug would be approved, 1.2.
Yes. Let's do 1 drug because you can't split a drug in 0.2
would not make sense.
Yes.
So we would be seeing $25 million, 1 cross 25. So total revenues from phase 2 would be 150, phase 3 will be 25, total be 175 million. Now, looking back into what our target was, which is of 3 times revenue in 4 years, with this, we would still fall a lot short to what our revenue targets look to be.
Okay. So that's great. Can you maybe brainstorm some ways in which we could fill this gap in the target?
Can I have a moment think about it here?
Sure.
So I can look at so the propensity further. We are more or less falling short by 225 million to reach our target 3 times revenue. Now to do this, I can think about it from angles. The first angle will be from a drug pipeline perspective. Maybe look into how we can have a higher successful approval rate, specifically speaking for phase 2. But maybe that can help us proceed a lot further. The second up would be to kind of understand, are there any other probable perspectives that the drugs can fill up? Not just for the disease that they are actually being made for, but some cross diseases that could be worthwhile looking into. The second major bucket that we can probably look into would be from market and account management standpoints. Look into what could be a few potential levers we can play to increase our maximum revenue. I believe this to be a function of total number of people and the pricing. So maybe look into whether more people could adopt this I understand that this is a very rare disease, so that would not be a very practical way to go about it. Maybe looking into a bit pricing, how we can price this better compared to our competitors. So is this where you would want us to go there?
Yeah, that's certainly
Hmm.
some ways. Is there anything else you can think about? We're just trying to grow like aggressively. So,
Okay.
um,
Uh, Here what we did see was phase 2, we calculated it from year 1 to year 2, and
mhm.
similarly for phase 3. Even after time to commercialization, the drug would continue to grow, and I missed that point. So maybe if I do calculate for that, we can see if it continues growing and what it could potentially attain.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Hmm.
But let's table that for now. Maybe qualitatively, if you can think of other options or solutions.
Uh, Other options, a few other ways I could probably think about could be from a partnership standpoint to increase the number of units that he can sell. Uh, I'll assume
Okay.
there seems to be a lot of competition since you
Yep.
say about smaller biotech company. So partnering with Redibit eye clinics or partnering with some uh, doctors for some special clinical research or trials or just normal medicine could help to increase our other ways I could probably think about it could be as the further look whether there are some governmental grants that goes around, uh, any governmental schemes that discounts this and probably bid for being elected as preferred governmental drug. That could possibly be your help. Yes, that are some days that I'm about.
Great. So the CEO is going to walk in through the door for your final recommendations. Do
Hmm.
you mind just giving a quick summary of what you've found throughout this case?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for the case. We were hired to understand how we can increase the revenue for our new business unit to 3 times. Based on our analysis, it seems that we would fall short of attaining 3 times revenue, but could probably attain almost 3 times the current revenues. A few things that we can brainstorm going further to attain the remaining could be first up from better approval rates. Second up could be majorly from a market standpoint, which could be playing with partnerships. Something along joint ventures could possibly help. And finally, on uh, hiking up or playing with the pricey deals. With this being said, a few risks that we should probably be aware of. Approvals are not something that we can possibly control. It is something that depends on how a drug would react to what patients perceive. So we should always be ready to see whether the drugs do not succeed at all. The second up could be the risk of capital being stuck if we are going into developing our markets and account management perspectives. The third could be from a regulatory standpoint, since these are very rare diseases. I assume there to be a lot more regulatory pressures for companies operating there. With that being said, I would like to thank you.
Awesome. Congrats, Akash. Everyone, I want to see some virtual applause for Akash. Takes a great deal of courage to do this in front of a live audience. So, yeah, Akash, you're done. Before I go into feedback, do you want to do maybe a quick self feedback or your thoughts on how you did on this case?
Sure. So, to be very honest, I am very new to this field of healthcare. So, I did not know a lot of terms.
Yep.
Now, to speak from the structural standpoint, I feel the structure could have it a bit more customized to mimic how the medical field works. The second up, I would say, is from the exhibit. Uh, I would say that I failed to understand the exhibit a lot better, and that led me that led us to a lot of back and forth calculations and conversations. Maybe I should have asked what it means upfront, and that would have fostered help going further.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. So let me give my feedback right now. So I'll start from the beginning. I think you did a fantastic job given your lack of knowledge of how the pharma value chain works. I think you did fantastic in that regard. I do want to give you feedback on various aspects of the case. So first of all, in the beginning, when you summarized the prompt, it was great. You gave a good synthesis, which I like to hear, instead of just repeating back the prompt. A lot of folks, what I see through my coaching and what I've seen through my interviewing while I was at BCG, is that people just repeat the prompt. And instead, I think a smart synthesis is what the interviewer is looking for. Second is your clarifying questions. I think they were great. I always advise folks to ask two different types of questions. One that is about the business objective, and the second is about what is the business model. Okay, and I think you asked questions in both of those regards. You asked about the value chain. You asked about the competitive landscape when it comes to the business model. In terms of the objective, you probably have seen that I pushed you a little bit into telling me what you're thinking about. So I always like folks to be very hypothesis driven, as in, okay, you're thinking of this objective. Are you thinking of a financial objective? If that's the case, what is the financial objective that you're thinking of? And what this does for the interviewer is it gives me confidence that you're already starting to think about this problem in a very hypothesis driven manner. Okay. As for your framework, let's move on to that section now. So you took about 1 minute and 45 seconds to do the framework. It's a tad bit longer than what I would like. Typically, we recommend folks to do a 90-second framework. And this obviously comes with more practice. As you do more and more frameworks, you get used to it. In terms of your framework itself, you had two buckets, one that was around development and the other one was around diversification. I think given your lack of knowledge of the pharma industry, I think these sufficed. But however, they were a bit generic and they didn't really take into account the nuances of the pharma industry. So for example, in pharma, you can consider obviously things that are in development versus things that are already commercial in the market. You can break them down in that format. And then in terms of, you had one item here on product customizations. That's not really a thing in the pharma industry, I would say. Another way of saying this would be you take the same product and try it out in different indications. Indication is the proper term for this. So for example, the product might have been approved for retinoblastoma, but you could try this, you could expand it to other cancers as a starting point. So that would be similar to what you think of a customization or product features in this case. So trying it out in related diseases. In terms of the market, organic channels, inorganic channels, I think you had some good ideas around partnerships with eye clinics. That's fantastic. Having good account management systems, that's great as well. This could be some of the nuance of the pharma industry could be brought in further here. For example, what is the patient base that I'm targeting? Are these adult patients? Are these pediatric patients? Who is the main stakeholder here? If it's pediatric patients, it's mostly their parents. And then what type of doctors are you targeting? Are you targeting rare disease doctors? Are you targeting ophthalmologists? So understanding the customer base, you would basically, in generic terms, you'd call this customer segmentation. So understanding the customer segments very well. And then, of course, things like what is the what is the growth trends, right? So growth trends, it could be what is the incidence of retinoblastoma per year in Europe, and how is this evolving? What has this looked like in the past 10 years? What is the forecast in the future? So this would tell you more around the growth trends in terms of volume per se. You had some good ideas around pricing, although we did not focus the case on that. Some other things that you could focus on a bit more, I would say, is to dig deeper into the competitive landscape. You could have looked more into what other companies are out there, what is their approval timeline like, what is the pros and cons of their drug versus our drug. So maybe Novartis's drug has higher efficacy, better safety profile. These are things that in the pharma industry is considered as factors. So you could certainly include those as well. So that's kind of what I would say as like a example framework. What I like to say is that there can be hundreds of different frameworks created for a single case. There's no correct framework. However, some frameworks are better than others. So that's the way I like to think about frameworks. So folks who are listening in and tuning in, this is just one example of a framework. There could certainly be better frameworks created. Okay, let's go into the following part. I think it took you some time to navigate through that. We're not focusing on the commercial aspect as in what is currently in market. We're focusing more on what is in the pipeline. But once you got there, I think you did a solid job. It did take some time to go over the exhibit. So let's walk through that a bit more in detail. I know there's some audience questions around this as well. So first thing we need to keep in mind, what is a client goal? The client goal here is to 3x their revenue in the next 4 years. So from just based on that, research and phase 1 would be automatically excluded. So then you can place your efforts into phase 2 and phase 3. So the first thing what I would do here is look at, okay, there's these number of drugs in the pipeline. How many of these, if the probability rates are correct, what would be the potential number of drugs that would get approved? So you would basically take 40% and multiply it by 5 in this case, and then 60% multiplied by 2. That's the first thing you would do. And then you would take into account, if they got approved, what is the time to commercialization? So the drugs that are in phase 2 would take 2 years to commercialize. So they would only be in market for 2 more years to fall within that 4-year timeline, right? And for phase 3, it would be 1 year to market. So they would be in the market for 3 more years. So that's kind of how I would think about it. And then you can start taking into account these revenue scaling. So what is the ramp up period? So in year 1, it would be a 25% realization of that 100 million revenue. In year 2 would be 50% of that. So that's how I would do the math. You did it in reverse order, but you did come to that eventually. You understood it. I think part of this could have been clarified with me, the interviewer. So anyone listening, I would always clarify if you don't understand what is in the table. Interviewers are more than happy to clarify that for you. Just to give a preview of the math here. This is all putting it together. So the things to focus on in particular are the revenue from phase 2 and the revenue from phase 3. And in total, once you do all of the math, it comes out to 300 million. I'm not sure if your math came to 300 million or had a different estimate, but that's what it would be once you did all the math together. So collectively, this would fall under the target. The target is 3xing 200, which is 600. So it would be $100 million below that target. So that's what I would say. We always urge folks to give a quantitative response. A quantitative response is what would be appreciated in this case. Okay. And then I think in terms of your in the case creative question around brainstorming, I think you had very solid ideas in there. I did like a number of those, but a few more that just to add here. I think you mentioned this briefly, but investigating this in other cancers, other type of rare diseases even. That could be very possible. International expansion beyond Europe. So looking at the US market. So US market is the most prolific for pharma. So I would certainly look at that. Another way, rare disease drugs. Again, this comes from a knowledge of the industry. So rare disease drugs cost very high. And that's because it's targeting very few patients. And so in order to recoup the research and development costs, the price of rare disease drugs tend to be high. And so in this case, you can think of oftentimes, depending on the country you're in or what kind of patient advocacy groups that there are for certain rare diseases, there can be patient assistance programs. And this can certainly help with higher penetration of the drug into the market. Okay. And I think another one that you mentioned was some collaborations. I think that was a fantastic idea as well. Partnership of that nature, I think, is great as well. Okay, so that's pretty much the feedback that I had. Japheth, do you want to take questions from the audience at this point?
Yeah, now's a good time. First off, thank you so much to both of you. Akash, I know it's probably about midnight by now for you, so I really appreciate you staying up for this. And then Ish as well for your fantastic leadership and feedback here. We've got 10 minutes left, and so we're going to answer as many questions as possible. And the best way to get your question answered is to type it in the chat. And so I'll just pull up a couple of ones that were coming in earlier. Number one, Ish, is around industry focus in case interviews. So is a healthcare case like this, is that something that, right, somebody only interviewing for like a healthcare specialist role should expect, or is this more something that, like, anybody, an industry that everybody should kind of be aware of and be up to date on for case interviews?
I think the short answer to that is everyone should have a basic understanding of the most common industries. Once you interview for a generalist role at a company like BCG. So that's kind of what I would say as the basic answer. And for that, there is, as part of Management Consultant, we have a number of industry primers, but also our managing director, Jenny Ray, and Naman, who's our CEO, they do podcasts together on various company overviews as part of the Strategy Simplified podcast, where they cover the basics of how and economics of various companies. And from those two resources, I think you can cover a lot of the industry primers and general industry knowledge. So I recommend anyone who's interviewing for a generalist firm to not only get an idea of the pharma industry, but any industry, any common industry, whether it be defense or aircrafts or mining or oil and gas. Just do a basic industry primer.
It's really helpful in regards to that. Could you give a list of industries? I don't know if that's necessarily the most helpful thing. Just give a list. Like, start with the business breakdowns on the podcast. There's a link here in the chat.
Yeah, and just to chime into that, if you go into any of the major companies' website, let's just take BCG. If you just go to the BCG website and look at industries, you will see a list of industries, and that's a starting point for you.
Super helpful. Great place to start. All right, how much does it affect your chances if you make a calculation mistake but realize it and correct it?
Great question. So during my time as an interviewer, it is not detrimental if you have a correct framework. So if you set up your math equation up front, you say that, okay, I'm going to multiply this by this by this by this to get to the target. And then I'm going to add these across phase 2 and 3. And then I'm going to see how this relates to our target. If you give that up front and then you make slight errors later on, depending on the interviewer, and again, some interviewers are more generous than others, but you're more likely to have a pass on that because you have recognized your mistake, you gave a solid framework up front, and then you have corrected it.
Here's a question about networking. So a little bit of a shift here. Sarah's asking, what questions do I ask during networking calls? How much should I talk about myself versus asking questions about the person I'm talking with?
Yeah, so great question. Always think about the person that you are talking to, be in their shoes as to what they want to hear, and what they would like to speak about. So, of course, give an introduction to yourself, inform them as to who you are, but also be enthusiastic about what they're doing, what their experience has been like in as a consultant in that office, in that company. What are some of the cases that they've worked on? So be very enthusiastic about them. People do like to talk about themselves. So ask those genuine questions, and that's a very good networking and rapport building approach.
I love it. Someone's asking a question about the next case. We do these once a month. The next one, I believe, is March 4th, so coming up in a couple of weeks. Yep, that'll be a different case, different industry. So we'd love to have you join us for that. Are there any from James, any like general trends in pharma that folks should kind of like pay attention to? Like you mentioned, having a general awareness of what's going on in an industry. I imagine this is kind of part of that, like being aware of like general big picture trends in like the major industries.
Yeah, I think you can certainly look them up if you want to, but beyond the basic mechanics of the industry, I don't think you have to know or have deep knowledge about the industry. It's not required at all. And I would say if you just watch the news day to day about like basic business trends, I think that should be sufficient to help you out. And the rest of the context is going to be given to you during the case.
Absolutely. The interviewers are on your side. Most of them. At least Ish is.
Yeah, I think so. Just to give you guys so interviewers are never trying to say like gotcha, like they're never trying to do that to interviewees. We genuinely, when I was part of the interview team, we really rooted for candidates. We want you to succeed. And so if you can't prove yourself, then like that's going to mean you're out. But the baseline, every interviewer walks in with the desire to see you succeed.
Absolutely. And so that's a great reason why candidates work with management consultants, work with coaches like Ish. So I'll just give a shameless plug to get on Ish's calendar. All right, we've got links in the chat where you can purchase 1 hour or 8 hours or 20 hours. All right, and you can talk with Katie to figure out which is the right fit for you for that. But Ish has got, I checked his calendar before we jumped on. He's got a couple of sessions starting as soon as Thursday, so 2 days from now, but those are limited. And of course, if you got interviews coming up, now's the time to do it. All right, we got a question from YouTube. Amazing. Thank you so much. Mishari, how much time is reasonable to spend building the framework?
Yeah, so what we recommend here at Management Consulted is 90 seconds, I would say, is the max. Of course, no one is measuring time, and it's not part of the scoring. But the quicker you can do it, the better. And this is a practice. You should not stress too much that, oh my God, I'm taking like 91 seconds instead of 90. It's a general rule. Beyond that, it starts feeling long. So use that as a benchmark as you're practicing, as you're doing drills. We at Management Consultant have a set of structuring drills where you can do a set of frameworks repeatedly, and that will help you build that kind of a muscle to do frameworks quickly and more efficiently, and of course correctly in a short amount of time. So once you do those, you should be able to be within that 90-second time frame.
I love it. All right, switching gears a little bit to the fit interview. So this question, I'm just going to summarize it a little bit, paraphrase it. In the fit interview, how much do you talk about your PhD, right? PhD research, PhD accomplishments in an introduction in a fit interview? Dhananjay, it might be helpful if you clarify right? So we can give you a little bit of a more specific answer. But Ish, if there's anything you want to add, say to that one.
Yeah. So if you are from a PhD background, then and everyone gets this question, which is like, walk me through your resume, tell me about yourself. There's some form of that question that you get initially. And regardless of your background, you should talk about what your accomplishments are, what you've succeeded in. And if it comes from your PhD, then yeah, definitely you will need to talk about it. But be very careful. You are not supposed to talk in scientific jargon or in ways that people cannot understand, because a lot of folks will not be PhDs on the other side who are interviewing you. So be very careful of that. Speak in a way in which the other person can really understand your accomplishments.
That's so good, Ish. That's what we help people do with Black Belt, and particular with our resume edits, is we help you reframe your experience for a business context, so that we're going to talk about your PhD accomplishments, your research, but in a way that an eighth grader can understand, and in a way that a recruiter or a consultant in any role can, and any firm can understand and figure out how you might be a fit for that firm. All right, we've got 1 to 2 questions left here. Max is asking, how reasonable is it to ask for extra time in a BCG interview?
Extra time for in any particular,
for brainstorming question or to digest an exhibit?
Yeah, I mean, don't abuse it. Don't ask, oh, can I take 60 seconds or can I take a moment every single time you get a question? But also, if you need time, use it. That's going to be my answer, because there's no formula for this. Of course, you're going to take time when you do your framework in the beginning, but then every subsequent time, if you see you are in a roadblock or you cannot think further, take time, but also don't abuse it every single time.
That wraps up another episode of Strategy Simplified. Thank you for tuning in, whether you're joining us from Apple or Spotify or Google or YouTube or somewhere else. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you on another episode soon.